Canada announces huge armored vehicle package for Ukraine. But what is going on? Why are we talking about Canada so much on my channel recently? Well, Canada just announced what amounts to a protected mobility surge for Ukraine, and the center of gravity in this package is a number that should make Russian drone operators groan out loud. 383 Roshel Senator armored vehicles that also includes 66 LAV-6s or LAV-6s. Hey friends, Wes here, and Mark Carney better make me an honorary Canadian citizen, just saying. Of course, this incredible news dropped right in the middle of my bar exam when I had no communications with the outside world, so I had to sit on it until I got back home. In reality, my colleague and LinkedIn buddy Dylan Masiolov over at Defense Blog moved fast on the story, and Ottawa followed with official language that confirms the scale. Thank you, Canada. I salute you. Reuters, meanwhile, framed the week's announcement in the larger financial package. Canada is providing 300 million Canadian dollars in new military aid as part of a previously announced $2 billion envelope, and it's adding sanctions on 100 vessels tied to Russia's shadow fleet. Boom shakalaka. If you want the tactical translation, it's this. More Ukrainian soldiers will move in armored trucks instead of pickup beds. More wounded will get pulled out in something with blast protection instead of a minivan. More units will have the ability to relocate under drone threat without treating every road as a potential obituary. Now that may sound mundane, but it's exactly why it matters. This war has turned getting there alive into a primary combat function. Both sides have built an entire industrial habit around punishing movement. FPVs on roads, mines on likely routes, artillery on intersections, and drone reconnaissance to cue strikes. Ukraine's answer has been layered defense, deception, dispersion, and a constant hunt for more protected mobility. So the Canadian government's own release is unusually specific for wartime aid language. It explicitly names the 383 Senator armored vehicles by Roshel and 66 light armored vehicles, or LAV-6s, from General Dynamics. Now that matters because it tells you Ottawa is leaning into two very different layers of mobility. Interestingly, after my last video about Roshel's donation to Ukraine, Roshel's CEO, Roman Shimonov, connected with me on LinkedIn to keep the door open about the future of the company. I love media-savvy CEOs. They recognize that one of the fastest ways into the public sphere isn't an email to the director of PR and demanding a press release. Instead, it's having guys like me and Dylan Masiolov on LinkedIn speed dial. Anyways, it wasn't just the Senators. The LAV-6 is a true armored fighting vehicle family, heavier and more capable in the classic mechanized sense. The Senator is the other end of the toolkit, a mass-producible, wheeled armored workhorse that can be spread across units quickly. This matches how Ukraine actually fights. Not every unit needs a Bradley IFV. Every unit, though, does need something that can move people and supplies without losing half its passengers to a mine and an FPV combo. So Canada didn't just discover the Roshel this week. Ottawa has been feeding Senators into Ukraine for years, starting with small numbers and scaling up as the vehicle proved itself and as the war's drone and mine reality became the defining threat. Canada's Department of National Defense has a public ledger of its military support, and in that list, Canada notes it donated 8 Roshel armored vehicles in May of 2022, and then later donated 200 additional Senator vehicles in January of 2023. Now, that 2023 announcement made during a ministerial visit to Kyiv framed the 200 as responding to a specific Ukrainian request and pegged the package value at over 90 million Canadian dollars. That was the official Canadian channel. The other channel has been global procurement and partner financing. So Roshel's CEO has said the company's delivered more than 2,000 Senator vehicles to Ukraine since the full-scale invasion began. 4 years ago now. Now, that implication is blunt. Canada's direct donations are a minority of the total fleet, while the overall Senator pipeline has become one of the largest single sources of protected mobility from a non-governmental company in Ukrainian service. Now, that matters for 2 reasons. First, it explains why another 383 is not a drop in the bucket. It's a deliberate decision to keep feeding a platform that Ukraine already knows how to operate, maintain, and integrate into units. You don't introduce complexity for funsies in wartime. You reinforce what works. Second, it shows how war production actually scales now. It's not only aid, it's a hybrid of state funding, direct procurement, and industrial ramp-up anchored in a proven vehicle line. Okay, so since we're all tech nerds here, what is the Roshel Senator exactly? I mean, look at this beast. I just want to walk up to it and say, hey, I see you sitting here all alone. Do you like raisins? How about a date? Yeah? What I'm saying, Senators, you sexy AF. So Roshel sells more than one Senator variant. I know, dad jokes, that's why you're here. Roshel sells more than one Senator variant. That's where some of the casual reporting out there gets sloppy because people use Senator the same way people say Jeep. Ukraine has used both the APC-style Senator and the MRAP-style Senator, and the geometry matters. The Senator APC, described as a multi-purpose vehicle, is a 4x4 platform with a 6.7-liter diesel V8 producing 330 horsepower and 750 foot-pounds of torque, paired with a 10-speed automatic transmission. It has seating for up to 12, so you can take your kids and your grandkids on that family trip to Mount Rushmore. Roshel, if you're watching, send me a Senator, and I promise you I will do a video review and park it in my driveway just to piss off my homeowners association. It'll be glorious. Now, the other side, the Senator MRAP, lists the same engine and drivetrain figures, but it only seats up to 10. Now, this is a heavy-duty commercial-rooted armored platform optimized for the most common and the most lethal threats in this war: fragments, drones, small arms, mines, and more drones. So protection is the entire point, and the Senator is designed around that. Reporting has also described the Senator MRAP as passing NATO-level ballistic and blast testing, with specific references to STANAG 4569 and blast test weights, including the 6-kilogram under-wheel and under-body scenarios, which is the MRAP world's baseline vocabulary. You don't need to memorize the STANAG codes to understand the operational meaning. A Senator is built to get hit and keep people inside alive. In Ukraine, that translates into a vehicle that may be knocked out, burned, or crippled, but it still does its primary job. It keeps bodies from becoming statistics. And this is why it keeps showing up in the ugliest kinds of videos. My last video on the Roshel Senator last year was about one that survived a direct strike from an FPV drone, and all the Ukrainian crew survived. So how does Ukraine use the Senator? Well, Ukraine doesn't use it as a frontline assault vehicle in the classic sense. It uses it the way a modern army uses protected mobility when drones dominate the air and artillery dominates the earth. It uses it for troop movement between positions where visibility is high and time exposed is deadly. It uses it for logistics runs because drones don't care whether you're delivering ammo or bread. They only care that you're on a road. Ukraine uses it for medevac, casevac, both formal and improvised, because the golden hour has been getting strangled in drone-saturated zones, and it uses it for special units that need a vehicle that can absorb punishment and still move. Now, that last piece is not theory. Roshel's CEO has publicly highlighted footage from Ukraine showing a Senator taking that drone strike and continuing to move long enough for the occupants to safely dismount. Now, there's been other reporting that has highlighted a Senator surviving a mine blast. It hit so hard it lost a wheel, but it kept moving to evacuate soldiers, which is marketing gold. That is an image you can't buy on marketing spend on Meta's ad platform. So this is the Senator's war in a nutshell. It's not about being indestructible, it's about buying seconds and preserving lives. But Ukraine's problem isn't only enemy fire, it's the geometry of exposure. Every time a unit moves, it creates a signature: thermal, visual, electronic, pattern of life. Drones spot, artillery and FPVs punish, mines finish the job. The Senator's value is that it raises the threshold for the enemy's easy kill. A soft-skinned truck that hits a mine turns into a mass casualty event. A Senator that hits a mine becomes a recovery problem and a mobility problem. That's still awful, but it's also the difference between a platoon being combat ineffective and a platoon being angry, shaken, and still alive. If you've ever driven roads under threat, you know mines are psychological warfare as much as physical. They make every movement feel like a coin toss. Protected mobility is how you weigh that coin slightly back in your favor, to land more frequently on heads than tails. Soldiers who believe they have a chance to survive movement fight differently. They make better decisions. They take less stupid risks out of fatalism. In a war where drones punish hesitation and panic equally, that matters. The strengths are clear. Wheeled platforms are fast, simpler to maintain, and easier to field in large numbers. Commercial-rooted drivetrains mean parts availability is better than for exotic military-only designs. The vehicle can be produced quickly. Roshel has proven that. And production can be scaled, which is why Ukraine ended up with the Senator in the first place. Now, we gotta be adults and mention the limits are also clear. This is not a tank with a cannon and heavy armor. It is vulnerable to anti-armor weapons, heavy artillery hits, and the kind of close-range FPV strikes that can place a shaped charge precisely where it hurts most. It's also constrained by terrain in a way that all-wheeled vehicles are, especially when the battlefield becomes mud season, which it's about to do in Ukraine. So why do they work anyway? Well, because the Senator is fighting the most common threats, not the most cinematic ones. Most casualties in this war don't come from tank duels. They come from artillery, mines, drones, and fragments. A vehicle that raises survivability against those hazards pays for itself in preserved manpower. So in 2026, Ukraine's job is to keep winning in a war of attrition while also building a force that can survive the next phase of Russian adaptation. Russia keeps pushing drones down the cost curve. Ukraine keeps pushing survivability up the curve. Those two lines meet on roads, in trenches, at medevac points. A few hundred more senators won't win the war, but they will reduce the number of avoidable deaths. They will improve unit mobility under threat. They will let Ukraine keep its manpower, which is a strategic resource in a country fighting for survival. And they send a message too. Canada isn't only writing checks, it's building a pipeline of tangible equipment that shows up on the front, gets filmed, gets hit, and still does its job. In a war where propaganda is constant, the most persuasive argument is a vehicle that survives long enough for the crew to walk away. That's the Roshel Senator story in one sentence. It's a machine built for the ugly middle of war where movement kills, and surviving movement is a form of combat power. Put that on your next brochure, Roman. Buying seconds, preserving lives. That's it for today, my friends. Subscribing is the best way to support this channel. Yes, I just took the Michigan bar exam. If you want to know how that went, you can read all about it over at my Substack newsletter called Eyes Only. But here's a hint. They had therapy dogs on site for stressed out test takers. That should tell you how fun it was. And as always, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.